number of your videos in which you make remarkably accurate predictions. So that's what I know about you, and I'm impressed by that, by your ability to call events before they happen. So with that in mind, let me ask you, where do you think this war in Iran is going? How will it be resolved, and what are the consequences likely to be?
Well, thanks so much for inviting me, Tucker. I'm a huge fan. I've been admiring your work for a number of years now.
Thank you.
So I think that this war in Iran will be very similar to the war in Ukraine, meaning that this will be drawn out, be a war of attrition. Neither side will concede defeat, even though it is in their best interest to reach a ceasefire. And this will have dramatic consequences on the global economy. And this war could drag on for years and years. Already, we're seeing major repercussions on the global economy in that flights are being canceled. In Southeast Asia, they ran out of fuel, so they're asking people to stay at home. And in a few more months, experts are predicting a food shortage, meaning that nations will be forced into food rationing. And today, there's a major escalation in that the Israelis struck the largest gas field in Iran, and Iran retaliated by attacking energy infrastructure of the GCC. And Iran has stated that its purpose, its goal, its strategy is to move oil to $200 a barrel, which will have a really significant impact on the global economy because the entire global economy is based on access to cheap energy. So unfortunately, I think that we can expect this war to drag on for years and years. Eventually, America will send in ground troops. Eventually, the Strait of Hormuz will be contested. Eventually, this will spread all across the world. Eventually, other nations will be drawn in. So Saudi Arabia is thinking about declaring war on Iran. And Saudi Arabia has a mutual defense pact with Pakistan. So Pakistan will be drawn into this war. So things are spiraling out of control. And just recently, Ali Larijani, who is the de facto head of the Iranian war effort, was assassinated. And he was a pragmatic elder statesman in Iran who had the authority to negotiate a ceasefire. Now that he's gone, there really is no more off-ramp. So both sides are committed to a long war of attrition, and the consequences for the entire global economy are quite dire.
That is, I wouldn't say that's the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario would include a nuclear strike by one or more actors and the destruction of the Aqsa Mosque complex in Jerusalem, which would spark a religious war. So that's as bad as it could get, but you've just described one step before the worst, which is protracted, destructive, impossible to stop. So my question is, because there are so many global players, big global players, the US and China, I think, who would be hurt by this, why is there not an incentive to get it settled quickly, and why can't that happen?
Right. So once this war starts, it achieves a momentum and a logic of its own. So the United States doesn't really have an off-ramp, meaning that if it tries to negotiate a ceasefire with Iran would ask for reparations, about $1 trillion, basically. It would ask for the United States to leave the Middle East permanently to ensure its long-term survival. If the United States were to do that, then the GCC nations would collectively become client states of Iran, because only Iran can guarantee their safety, as well as use of the Strait of Hormuz. The GCC is the basis of the petrodollar. So what the GCC does is it sells oil in US dollars and then recycles this money back into the American economy. So if the GCC were to abandon the petrodollar, then this would have severe repercussions on the American economy. Also, there'd be a chain reaction in that Japan and South Korea would look at what's happened in the Middle East and decide that the United States can no longer guarantee their safety. So they would have to remilitarize, and they would have to spend all the resources on adapting to the possible China threat. And then you have Europe, and then Europe would look at what happened in the GCC as well as in Southeast Asia, and they would be like, why are we fighting Russia? Wouldn't it be in our best interest to negotiate a peace treaty with Russia as soon as possible? What this would mean the collapse of the US dollar as a global reserve currency. Remember that America is sitting on $39 trillion in debt. And so the American economy is a Ponzi scheme that relies on foreign nations to continually buy US dollars. So the US economy would not be able to withstand essentially American withdrawal from the Middle East. So the Americans are stuck where they are right now, unfortunately.
What is the Chinese perspective on this? I mean, it seems like China has an interest in peace in the Persian Gulf with those 7 oil-producing countries. Why wouldn't China step in and try and settle this?
So both the United States and China benefit from the status quo. And China has a vested interest in seeing a very quick solution to this war in the Middle East. China imports about 40% of its energy needs from the GCC. So not just Iranian oil, but also Qatari natural gas.
Right.
So as you point out, China very much wants to see, as soon as possible, a ceasefire. Unfortunately, it is the nature of the Chinese government not to interfere in foreign affairs. China doesn't really have a geopolitical framework, a grand strategy. It really believes in global trade. And it doesn't really have a framework for how to resolve armed conflict. And so Chinese policymakers are really stuck. And in fact, Chinese policymakers have come out publicly saying that they would like the carnage, the violence in the Middle East to stop as soon as possible, and for the Strait of Hormuz to open up. But unfortunately, as I pointed out previously, when a war starts, it achieves a momentum and a logic of its own. And it's very hard to stop a war once it starts.
So if your prediction is correct, and I pray that it's not, and I'm sure you do too, hope that
Yes.
you're wrong, but if you're not wrong,
Yes.
and this continues